ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नंदनाय च नंदगोपकुमाराय गोविंदाय नमो नमः। उमज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनच्छलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेशा गोपिकाकांत राधाकांत नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। पंचकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। ओम विष्णुपादाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय राधानाथ स्वामी नामिने नमो। ओम विष्णुपादाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष कृपातमहं वंदे श्रीगुरून् दीनतारिणं परमानन्दमाधवं श्रीचैतन्येश्वरम्। हरि ओम तत्सत्। Hare Krishna. So today we are discussing chapter 27 of the third canto. This is the continuing discussion, which is the beautiful divine Bhagavatam class, which is being given by Kapila Muni directly to his mother Devahuti, the original Bhagavad. So there is one speaker and one listener. Of course, after it has become documented in the Bhagavad now, millions and millions around the world have heard this discourse. So just like originally in the Bhagavad Gita, it was a conversation between Krishna and Arjun, and through Arjun, this knowledge was given to the whole world. Similarly, here, through Devahuti, Lord Kapila is giving the Sankhya philosophy to the whole world. So Mother Devahuti, being so pious and greatly blessed, so many years of devoted austerities and seva to her enlightened husband as well as to the Supreme Lord, she is blessed with spiritual inquisitiveness, and she is also blessed with the Supreme Lord as her son. And as was foretold by the Lord and also later by Kardama Muni, she's been instructed in spiritual knowledge by her son. So this conversation we have been discussing for the last couple of chapters of how after she approached her son at one point in time and expressed desire to become free from all suffering and moroseness and asked him to clarify the means to achieve such a state, Lord Kapila begins to explain the philosophy of the Bhagavad, of the Gita, but with a specific approach of the Sankhya. Now, like what we discussed, Sankhya is a peculiar mix of Jnana, Ashtanga Yoga, as well as Bhakti. Of course, without Bhakti, no spiritual activity can actually bear fruit. We discussed this last time also. That is why bhakti is important. Bhakti means acknowledging the existence of the Supreme Lord and accepting one's subservience to Him as an absolute minimum, willingly submitting oneself to Him. Even though one may not be very advanced in one's surrender, but at least up to that point. Without that, one cannot even attain the heavenly planets without that. What to speak of achieving liberation or impersonal liberation or other yogic attainments. Without having faith in the Lord, one cannot even achieve the heavenly planets. That's why some of these living entities who do not have the necessary faith, they are actually pushed to the lower planets than going to the upper planets. Anyway, in the chapter 26, 27, 28, Lord Kapila is answering questions of Mother Devahuti. Mother Devahuti specifically asked how she can make rapid progress. And specifically, she wanted to know in more detail about the process of yoga and the process of jnana, of how these processes through these processes one can actually also help one's own elevation. Also, this jnana, as has been discussed, here the jnana refers to tattva jnana, knowledge of the principles, how a proper understanding of these principles actually helps one develop detachment from material nature, because one can clearly understand one's own position as spiritual and distinct from matter. So we had a bit of this discussion on the jnana aspects in the last class. And this conversation, which is chapter 27, is actually an extension of that conversation, where having described the various material categories and how the living entity gets entangled, Lord Kapila is utilizing this chapter to explain the process by which, the Sankhya process essentially, by which, as a combination of bhakti, yoga and jnana, the yogi can extricate himself from material existence and achieve perfection. So it's a very interesting, beautiful chapter. And there are various very interesting and deep philosophical truths which get revealed in this chapter, which are very fundamental for all of us to understand very clearly, especially those which explain why we are entangled and how we can disentangle ourselves. It's very nice. So this chapter as such is not very long. It's around 30 odd verses. But nonetheless, it is very profound and contains very heavy spiritual truths. So let us see how Lord Kapila explains this process to Mother Devahuti. So the first thing that he starts explaining to Mother Devahuti is why the living entity who's actually spiritual, how does he actually get trapped? How does he actually get overwhelmed? So before we can cure the disease, like what we discussed last time, we have to first understand what is the disease. And it is good to know how the disease is contracted so that we are careful. Yeah. Because if you are not careful, we may be in the process of recovery, but if you are not careful, we'll get infected again. So it's good to know. Yeah. Just like now, many of us are taking vaccines, but still we have to be careful. This vaccine is not full protection. You have not become transcendental to the body. You may have improved your immunity, but we still have to be careful. So we should understand, we are in this material world. What are we infected with? What is that virus? So the virus that the pure soul is infected with is a virus with 3 mutations, 3 variants, which are Sattvagun, Rajogun, Tamagun. These 3 mutations of material consciousness is what affects or infects the pure consciousness of the jiva. And this infection is so strong that even though the soul is originally pure and spiritual and unchanging, when it comes in contact with this virus, it goes through a temporary transformation of consciousness. And that living entity, which is transcendental, just like the example is given in the Bhagavad, just like the sun. The sun, when it is reflected on the water, is a reflection of the sun on the water. But if there is something which happens to the reflection of the sun on the water, it doesn't actually affect the sun. Yeah, for example, let's say you are looking at a lake, and in the lake you see the reflection of the sun or the moon, and the water is very steady. You see the moon or the sun very clearly. But then let's say you disturb the water by putting a piece of stone. What happens? Ripples are created in the water. And what happens when the ripples are created in the water? The reflection of the sun and the moon also start shaking and moving. Sometimes it appears it is torn apart. Sometimes it gets twisted and turned in various ways based on how the water is affected. This is a very beautiful example given in the Bhagavad. Similarly, even though the pure living entity is never directly affected, if the living entity whose consciousness is reflected in material nature, if he identifies with material nature, then whatever changes happen in the material nature, the living entity, because of the false ego, because of the illusion, thinks he is affected and becomes miserable. You get the example? Actually, the sun is not affected by what is happening on the water, isn't it? The sun is always steady. It is far beyond. It is never impacted, but the reflection can get impacted. But if the sun associates itself with the reflection, the sun thinks that it is being affected. So similarly, the Bhagavatam explains the pure soul who's under the spell of this Maya, that which is not, it thinks it is this reflection which is produced within the material elements. It identifies itself with the body as the self and become absorbed in material activity, thinking himself to be the proprietor of everything. And it goes from body to body. And because this living entity identifies, and why is this identification coming about? This is explained in verse 4 very categorically. It is not that actually the sun is in the sky, the reflection is on the water. Actually, the sun is not affected. So why is this? What is it that is causing this illusion? A very interesting question. The interesting point is, this is very important for us to understand. The interesting point is the identification that we are talking about, that the pure living entity has with this reflection of his consciousness within material nature, is happening because the soul in its contaminated consciousness is trying to enjoy material nature. That desire to enjoy material nature is expressed in the form of these three mutations in consciousness: Sattvagun, Rajogun, Tamogun. That consciousness becomes distorted like that and acquires these three kinds of material qualities. And as soon as these qualities come because of a desire to enjoy and lord over material nature, immediately that strong identification comes. Because when one tries to enjoy matter, one forgets that one is actually transcendental and actually identifies oneself with the reflection based on the false ego and gets entrapped. Is it confusing? I don't know. Or is it understandable? Living entity is like the sun in the sky, transcendental. It's reflected in the water. So the reflection of the water is like the consciousness of the pure soul, which is permeating the material body and the material world, activating the mind, intelligence. The activation of the mind and the intelligence and the body is not actually the problem, because the sun is never affected even with this activation. But the affection or the influence or the contamination comes as soon as the pure soul desires to enjoy matter through these three modes. And that is why the scriptures say that that is the beginning of the problem. The problem is not just that the soul is in the material world. That by itself is not the problem, because pure devotees of the Lord are also in the material world. They are not overwhelmed by Maya. The Lord himself comes into this material world in his various incarnations. He is not influenced by Maya, because neither the pure self-realized soul nor the Lord tries to enjoy matter in a material way. If the living entity tries to enjoy matter by trying to be the Lord of Maya, then he becomes overwhelmed by the illusory potency of the Lord. Nikatastha Maya Tara Jhapatiya Dhari. His pure consciousness is polluted and is grabbed by the witch of Maya, and he becomes so bewildered that he becomes so fixated on the reflection because of his desire to enjoy, that he forgets that he is actually above and beyond. And all that happens to the reflection is interpreted by the soul that is happening to him. And it thinks that, oh, I'm suffering, this is happening, I'm dying, see, I'm being cut, see, I'm being tossed around, I'm suffering, this is happening, that is happening. Oh, why God is doing this to me? God is not doing anything. You only are trying to foolishly, forgetting your real position, trying to enjoy matter. That is why you're becoming entrapped. So as long as the living entity gives up this faulty mentality, he will continue to suffer. Because in that faulty mentality, with that desire to enjoy, when the living entity starts performing activities with a desire to enjoy fruitive rewards, it produces karma. Faulty work. Because actually all activities meant to be performed for the pleasure of the Lord, but when the activity is performed for enjoyment of one's own mind and senses, yajnarthat karmano anyatra lokoyam karma bandhanah tadartham karma kaunteya mukta sangha samachara. If you perform activities for the Lord, understanding him to be the proprietor and enjoyer, then one is not affected by karma. But the living entity who's enamored by Maya, who's acting to satisfy his own mind and senses, becomes overwhelmed by the illusory energy, produces karma, becomes trapped in the cycle of birth and death. So he gets into a dream-like situation. He becomes so absorbed in that reflection, thinking himself to be the reflection, that he becomes lost in it. And that getting lost in that illusion is sometimes also compared to a dream. And this is also another very common example given in the scriptures very often. Why a dream? Because in a dream, let's say you are being chased by a tiger. And when you're chased by a tiger, what you do? You're running. Tiger is coming closer. And you are sweating. Actually, you're so scared, you're just about to, and a tiger is pouncing and he has put his claws and jaws on you. And you're like, I'm finished. The last moment of my life. Oh, after all the things I did, this is how my life is ending. So the person who's dreaming like this is thinking that he's actually going through all these things. But is anything actually happening to his body? Is he actually being chased by a tiger? No. He's actually just lying down on his bed in a nice on his comfortable mattress with AC on. He's still sweating because he's seeing a tiger in his dream. So, what is causing the suffering of the sleeping person, of this dreaming person? His identification of his dream personality with his real personality, and his thinking that whatever is happening to his dream body is actually happening to his body, is the illusion that the dreamer is in. Yeah, this is also another very beautiful example. So this misidentification. Yeah. So instead of understanding who I am, if I think I am something else which I am not, and if something is happening to that, if I think that that is happening to me, then I am suffering without anything happening to me. Correct or not? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So you're all sitting here, right? Yeah. Just think, right? If somebody comes and tells us, probably most likely all of you are at your own homes, but let's say we were outside and somebody comes to us and tells us, oh, do you know just now your house caught fire and everything is burned to ashes. So how we will feel? Or maybe actually nothing has happened also, but just that strong connection or identification that we have with those things which are connected to us, we will feel so much suffering. Even though the fire is not affecting us, we will feel like we are burning and the house is burning. That is the identification. So imagine what kind of suffering the soul will go through. Of course, imaginary suffering, because actually the soul doesn't get affected. But the soul suffers because of this contaminated consciousness. It suffers even though it doesn't actually get affected. Just like in a dream, right? You suffer, but you're actually not affected. So what you have to do to stop your suffering when you're dreaming like this? You have to wake up. Wake up, because when you wake up, you realize, oh, I was unnecessarily worried of this tiger. Maybe in my dream, if I knew that this was a dream, I would have turned around and slapped the tiger or jumped on his back and punched him. So it's actually fun when in a dream you realize it's a dream. It used to happen to me very often. I used to get dreams where I would know it's a dream, so I would have a lot of fun because I know it. I'm in a dream, so I would do all kinds of things because I have all the 8 mystic powers where I'm in my dream. Yeah, I can fly, I can transform, I can do anything because you are already in the mental world where anything and everything is possible. So if you know how to play the game, then you are not affected. You can be there but be unaffected because you know what the reality is. So the initial few verses, Lord Kapil is actually explaining this concept. This is very important. So the summary of this point of what we have discussed all this while is that essentially the problem is misidentification. And that misidentification is expressed in our desire to enjoy matter. So obviously the solution also is to not want to enjoy matter. Isn't it logical, right? Yeah. And we got infected because we want to enjoy and we want to be disinfected. So we should not look at matter with a desire to enjoy. But how to not enjoy matter when we are in the world of matter, at least now in our current state? So Lord Kapila starts giving the answer to his mother by saying that the actual solution to get out of this condition is to stop this propensity of enjoying matter by very seriously engaging in the process of devotional service. simultaneously cultivating detachment from the world. Means don't try to enjoy. If you try to enjoy, then you will not be able to cultivate your devotion to the Lord. Because what is devotion to the Lord? Devotion to the Lord and surrender to the Lord, or bhakti here, also means understanding that this world is not the object of my enjoyment. It is the property of the Lord. Ishavasyam idam sarvam yat kinchit jagatyam jagattena taktena munjitam agragakasasiddharam. This whole world is the property of the Lord. Yes, I can use it, but just as much as I need for my purpose, for my quota as given by the Lord. But my purpose of life is not to enjoy this world. My purpose is to understand who I am as the eternal servant of the Lord and to transcend this illusion and attain the spiritual realm. So the soul who's trapped must cultivate serious devotional service with detachment, and he must bring his mind and his consciousness under his control. So rather than allowing the mind to wander and get infected by association with these three kinds of viruses, one must go into self-imposed quarantine so that one doesn't get infected. What is this quarantine? This quarantine doesn't mean one doesn't interact with the world. One can interact without a desire to enjoy materially. That is the beautiful point. Because the infection comes not by being in the world, the infection comes by the desire to lord it or to enjoy the world for oneself, independent of the Lord. And he says it also is helpful, because he's explaining Sankhya Yoga here. He says it's also helpful to follow the process of yoga, because the yoga process helps to control the body and the mind, so that one can, by employing the techniques of yoga, help himself both to detach from matter and attach to Krishna. Correct? Because spiritual life has two sides, right? Attachment to Krishna, detachment from matter. And just now that's what he spoke, bhakti and virakti. You see this theme continuously coming in all the scriptures. Because you cannot say, I will develop bhakti, but I will also have bhukti. Because bhukti and bhakti don't go together. Bhukti means material enjoyment. Bhukti means I am the enjoyer. Bhakti means Krishna is the enjoyer. How both can go together? So bhakti and virakti. So the yoga process also helps in virakti and can also help as a supporting limb for bhakti, because through certain processes one may be able to purify and help one to focus one's mind. Of course, it is not a must that one has to adopt the yogic processes to do that, but because the discussion is of Sankhya Yoga, that is being emphasized here. But for us as sadhakas, and this is what he explains in verse number 6, ultimately the sadhaka should attach himself to me through the process of unalloyed bhakti, which is by serving me through hearing and chanting about me. That is the recommendation. Mai bhavena satyena mat katha shravanena cha. This is what Lord Kapila says in verse number 6. One has to become faithful by practicing the controlling process of the yoga system, and one must elevate himself to the platform of unalloyed devotional service. Mai bhavena. Abhyasan shraddhayanvitaha, with great faith. Bhavena, with devotion. Satyena means pure devotion. And what is the characteristic of pure devotion? Mat katha shravanena cha. Hear about my glories. So simple, right? Because hearing about the Lord's glories is a very strong disinfectant. It's actually a very strong vaccine against material virus infection. Why it is so strong? Let us analyze. Sorry, I'm going a bit slower, but this is a very interesting point. If you can understand some of these points, it will help you a lot in your own spiritual understanding. Why is this Mat Katha Shravan so powerful? So let us go back to our discussion earlier of what is actually that it is causing our entanglement. What is our disease? Our disease is our exclusive focus on our selfish enjoyment, isn't it? So if you want to get out of the disease, then we have to reverse it. So a person who is materially diseased is always thinking, I, me, mine, my enjoyment. I want to enjoy. It's my life. I don't care about the world. I want to enjoy. I am the proprietor. I am the enjoyer. I am the controller. I'll be victorious. I'll be successful. I will celebrate. I am better than others. That is essentially the consciousness. So one is focused on enjoying and glorifying oneself. But what is bhakti? Mat katha shravan, glorification of Krishna's katha. So when one hears Krishna katha, what is one essentially doing? Rather than making oneself the focus of enjoyment and glorification, one diverts that mentality, that thinking to the supreme transcendent Lord. You understand? Rather than going towards the ego, one goes towards one diverts the focus to the material self, to the supreme self. In that way, hearing the glories of the Lord, Punya Shravana Kirtanaha, what does it do? This contamination, this virus, it removes. Hrudayantasto hi avadrani vidhunoti surutsatam. Vidhunoti, it washes all this infection out. Hridayanta, whatever infection is situated in one's heart. So, he is essentially summarizing in a summarized way, describing this process. So he's saying, practice bhakti. You can also take help of some yoga limbs, but Shravan and Kirtan for me must go on, cultivate detachment, and one must develop knowledge and develop pure qualities if one wants to disentangle oneself from material infection. And what are those qualities that one must develop? And these qualities develop naturally for a person who practices devotional service. Even though those who are jnanis or yogis have to make a special endeavor to perform austerities and yajnas to develop these qualities, but a bhakta develops them naturally simply by hearing and chanting about the Lord. So what are these qualities? There are actually many, many qualities, almost 18 qualities which are described here in the next few verses. So I'm just going to list them very, very quickly. I'm not going to go into a detailed discussion. Sarva Bhuta Samatva, equanimity to all jivas. One is not especially favoring or siding with somebody, so one doesn't essentially consider friend and enemies. Nirvaira, no enemies. Aprasanga, one is not materially, intimately connected with any person. Brahmacharya, celibacy. Mauna, being grave. Mauna means, or grave means not just talking about all material topics. A person's spiritual advancement can be seen based on how much he avoids talking about useless topics. Useless topics include material gossip. Of course, those are very gross things. But even all other topics which do not concern or help in the elevation of one's consciousness. Swadharmena baliyasa, which means making an effort to offer the results of one's activities to the Lord. And also another thing, being satisfied with whatever comes of its own accord. Yadruchayopalabdhena santushto. Very nice. Those who are very eager to enjoy, they are continuously in a greed mode. More. This greed mentality is actually it's a very dangerous mentality. Because greed is a fire which never gets satisfied. No matter how much one has, one always wants more. And because one always wants more, one is never satisfied, no matter how successful or wealthy one becomes. One is miserable no matter what one achieves. It's not that after achieving something, one is peaceful. At this point itself, we can discuss for 1 hour. We don't have that much time, but it's a very beautiful point. He who is satisfied with what he gets, as long as this is what is necessary for him, that is considered a wonderful spiritual quality. There was one very, very successful American businessman. It's a true story. He was being interviewed on live television. I don't remember his name. This is many decades ago, not a very recent story. And as he was being interviewed, he was asked, so many questions. And finally, he was asked, if we tell you to describe your state of mind, your state of consciousness with all this that you have achieved, if I ask you to describe it in one word, how will you summarize your state of consciousness? This was asked to a very, very wealthy and successful industrialist. And with great excitement and eagerness, as if he was giving profound wisdom, this particular industrialist, with big eyes, he told all his audience by shouting into the mic one word. You know what he shouted? Any guesses?
Miserable.
Huh?
Miserable.
Miserable. No. Yes, Santanam Prabhu knows the answer. Yes, Santanam Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
No, you wanted to say something? I thought you had unmuted yourself.
I was saying more because I learned this in the previous class when you told the answer, Prabhuji.
Yes, yes. So he said the one word is more. That is the state of his consciousness, which means even after achieving so much, what is his consciousness shouting out? I want more. Correct? Like a greedy man. Not like a greedy man. A greedy man is a man who goes to a buffet. He has taken so many things on his plate. But even after he's taking and he's eating, his attention is not on what he's eating. His attention is there is so much more lying out there. When will I go there and eat? He's not even enjoying what he's eating. He's just thinking and cursing. I have only such a small stomach. Oh, that counter has so much line. Hopefully that food doesn't finish by the time I reach there. You understand? This is the consciousness of greed. The consciousness of greed is such that it doesn't allow one to enjoy. One is suffering no matter how much one has actually attained. So he was describing and he was thinking he was giving profound wisdom. But those who know the Gita and Bhagavad, they know that this consciousness of more is a consciousness of suffering. It's not a consciousness of happiness. Santushta satatam yogi. A yogi's consciousness is of satisfaction. Because Krishna has said, Ashantasya kuto sukham. Unless you are peaceful and satisfied, where is actually the question of happiness? So materialists have it all wrong. They think more consumption and more accumulation is the formula for happiness. But the scriptures have always said, no, satisfaction is the formula of happiness, not more. So, yadruchopalabdhena santushto. Very important quality. So as devotees, these are also qualities we should aspire to develop. Which means if all of our life we are simply chasing after more than we need. Of course, each of us has our own set of needs. But sometimes we work far beyond what we need and forget the real purpose of life. Maybe little more, maybe, and there's no end to this. The next quality is Mita Bhuk, regulated eating. Not eating too much, not eating too little. Very thoughtful. I'm going to throw it quickly because this is just covered over 3 or 4 verses. Otherwise, we can spend an hour in discussing this itself. Living in a secluded place. This is a very interesting thing, living in a secluded place. For us, living in a secluded place doesn't necessarily mean living in a forest. Of course, from the perspective of Sankhya Yoga, probably it does, so that one is away from civilization and is not disturbed by the materialistic activities going around. But for the devotee, this essentially is to be interpreted as not partaking in the materialistic activities or materialistic association, which may be around oneself. Then one should be peaceful, one should be friendly, one should be compassionate, one should be determined, one should not have attraction or identification with bodily relationships, and one should be able with spiritual knowledge. Jnanena drashta tatvena prakrite purushasya cha nivritta buddhi avasthano. One must understand tattva gyan. One must be detached from the three modes of material nature. One must see reality as it is, understand the difference between matter and spirit. One must be aloof from all material conceptions, and one must be Atmadrik, always cognizant of one's identity as pure soul. So this is what he describes. These are important characteristics for this entanglement. Then Kapiladev continues that if one does like this, then the person can achieve liberation. Then he can realize the supreme transcendental Lord. He can realize the Paramatma who is seated in everyone's heart. And he can understand that that Lord is the cause of all these material elements. That all the material elements, this Prakriti is coming from him, and how the Lord is pervading all existence, and he is the very essence and the substratum of everything. And he is Advaya, one without a second. So he will come to the realization of that knowledge. Now, this is also a very interesting point. And then a very beautiful example is given. This chapter has a few very beautiful analogies to help us understand this point. So in verses 12 to 13, actually, it explains via an example how the yogi develops a vision of the presence of the super soul and the soul in the body, as well as, of course, the super soul everywhere. Of course, one is not able to see the super soul and the soul with this eyes, isn't it? But a very beautiful example is given how one can perceive it as one is advancing in spiritual consciousness. So the example is given in this chapter, just like the sun, and we spoke about this example earlier. So the same example is extended here. The sun is in the sky. The sun is reflected on the water. This far we have discussed earlier. Now the analogy is extended one step further. This reflected sun on the water is being reflected on a wall. Have you seen sometimes, if you are near a swimming pool, you can notice this sometimes. The sun is shining on top of the swimming pool. There's a reflection of the sun. But the shimmering of the moving water gets reflected on the walls which may be nearby to the swimming pool. And you can see some shimmering on the walls. Yes. If you have not noticed, maybe next time you can try. You can see some shimmering. You have to go and the sun is, sometime in the afternoon. Then you can see that shimmering. So one is the original sun, one is the immediate reflection, and one is the reflection of the reflection. Yes, because the sun is not directly shining its light On the wall, the sun is shining a reflection on the water, and the water is reflecting that light and casting it on the wall which is nearby. So let's say you just walk into the swimming pool. You cannot yet see the pool. You walk into the swimming area. You are not even looking into the sky to see the sun. You're not even looking at the water and seeing the reflection of the sun. But as soon as you enter, you first see the wall. And on the wall, you can see the shimmering of the sunlight. See the waves. I hope you can imagine. I don't know how well I'm painting this picture in front of your mind's eye. Hope you're getting the idea. So this shimmering you see, then you see, when you see that shimmering, you realize, oh, the sun is out there. You feel you are seeing the sun, but actually you're not seeing the sun. You're seeing the reflection of the sun. But by seeing that, you can infer that the sun is there, isn't it? Because if the sun wasn't there, you wouldn't see this effect on the wall. So this is the example of the analogy that is being given. So the same analogy can be extended that the Lord, it can be extended to the Jiva as well as to the Lord. As far as the Lord is concerned, the Lord is present everywhere in this creation through the form of his energies. He is manifested as the light of the sun, as the light of the moon. We have discussed so many beautiful things in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where the Lord is showing how his energies are present. Buddhir buddhimatam asmi. He is part of this whole cosmos is moving by his presence. So through the presence of the Lord's energies at a gross level and a subtle level, one can understand the Lord's presence in the whole existence. Even though one cannot see the Lord directly, one can become conscious of the presence of the Lord. One can infer the presence of the super soul, the Paramatma. And for the soul, the pure soul, we cannot see the soul because the soul is not an object of one's vision. The soul is the subject. It is transcendental. The comparison of the soul as compared to the reflection, because we discussed this example earlier, is the reflection of the consciousness of the soul as it is seen through the false ego. The three kinds of ahankar, sattvic, rajasic, tamasic. So I cannot see the soul, but I can perceive my ahankar. I can see that sense of I which is coming. Where is that light coming from? Even though it is distorted, even though it is not pure, it is a reflection, right? It is still moving, right? Because it's a reflection. It is getting disturbed on the surface of the water. That ahankar, that misidentification is there. But one can at least infer the presence of that consciousness because the soul's pure consciousness is getting reflected in the water. And further reflection of that reflection of the soul's pure consciousness can be seen in the 5 elements and the senses, in the body and the mind, through whatever activities are going on. Yes? Now there are around 35 families connected here and you're all hearing the Bhagavatam class. If I ask you, how do you know I am alive? You'll say, Prabhuji, what are you asking? Of course you're alive. But I'll repeat the question. How do you know I am alive? You're talking, you're moving, you're so excited and you are shouting. So we know you are alive. So even though you cannot see my soul, because technically only when the soul is in the body, somebody is alive. But can you actually go and see, oh, Prabhuji's soul is inside the body, that means he's alive? No, you can only see the effect. So the presence of the soul gives rise to consciousness, and consciousness produces certain symptoms of consciousness within the body and the material elements around. So when we see those symptoms, we can infer the presence of the soul. So Lord Kapila is trying to explain to us that this is how you can perceive. As the yogi advances in consciousness, he's able to discern like this. Because the soul and the Paramatma are not something which can be directly perceived through the material senses. But gradually, like this, the soul can be understood. So even though the soul may be perceived like this, actually it should always be understood that the soul is actually transcendent. It appears that the soul is merged within the five elements, and the material senses, the mind. But actually the soul is free and gradually needs to be disentangled. If one follows this process of Sankhya Yoga, Lord Kapila says, one can gradually understand that the soul is actually the seer, the witness. Yes. Again, what does this mean? Go back to the example that I gave earlier. You are in a dream. If you forget that you are in a dream, then you think whatever is happening to you is actually happening to you and you suffer. But if you are in a dream and you are aware you are seeing a dream, that this dream body that is you is not actually you, but something is happening to you, then you take a drashta perspective, which means you become a witness to what is happening to you, and you don't get so much affected. Prabhupada sometimes he gives this example. It's not, I don't think it is in these purports, but he has quoted this example a few times, which is given by the acharyas, that sometimes in a dream, one sees that one's head is cut off. I don't know if any of you have ever had such a dream. Prabhupada gives this example, says one's dream is, in the dream, one's head is cut off. Now the point is, if in the dream one sees that one's head is cut off, what does that mean? Anybody? What does it mean if you saw that your head is cut off in the dream?
Alive.
Yes. Amit is saying he is dead. Okay. What else? Reenaji, you are trying to say something?
It means that person is alive because he could able to see that.
Yeah. Correct. Because if somebody can see his head is cut off, can somebody see that his head is cut off? Because if your head is cut off, you're dead. You cannot see your head cut off, right? Just think about it. If your head is actually cut off, that means you're already dead. How can you see your cut off head? So sometimes in a dream, one sees one's head cut off. But if the head was actually cut off, then one would be dead and cannot see one's cut off head. So Prabhupada gives this example. This is where one understands, oh, actually I'm seeing this. I am the seer. I am not actually affected. I am not the person actually being affected. I was just identifying myself with what is happening to this dream person. So similarly, the soul is a drashta, is actually using this body and mind as a machine and working through it to interact with material nature. But ultimately, the soul is aloof. Krishna has already explained in the Bhagavad Gita, right? Prakritehe kriyamani gunai karmani sarvashah ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. That the bewildered soul, ahankara vimuda atma, ahankara vimud, that person who is especially bewildered because of his false identification, thinks he is the doer of activities, whereas actually the activities are carried out automatically by the modes of material nature. Gunaihi karmani sarvashah. This is also a very subtle point. Actually, this point is not very easy to understand. Because if you actually understand this point, then that means we are already very progressed quite a bit to disentangle ourselves from the modes of material nature. This point, I mean, To theoretically understand is one thing, but to be able to deeply understand this point is actually very difficult. But this is the vision that the yogi tries to cultivate, where he can understand that the material body and senses, the gunas, guna guneshu vartanta iti matvana sajjate, that describes. The wise soul understand that the material senses are engaged in their sense objects and are driven by the modes of nature. Guna guneshu vartanta iti matvana sajjate. Na sajjate means he doesn't get attached trying to enjoy that. He becomes disentangled and sees it from a distance. And hence, the soul is not touched by the modes of material nature. This is actually a very deep principle. Please forgive me if it is too heavy or too difficult to understand. If you can understand, it's okay. If you don't understand, it doesn't matter. Let it, like a bath, right? You put water, not everything stays on the body, it goes, but at least little bit will become wet. That's also okay. Slowly, our consciousness will get purified, and some of these subtle things will gradually be able to understand and appreciate. But just remember that the consciousness which is now so close to the body that the soul thinks it is itself the body, gradually the soul is able to differentiate itself and see as distinct from the body and the mind, and how the body and the mind are material and are engaged according to the three modes, and how actually the consciousness is unaffected. But that is a process. It's not so easy to do it. It is not just that you hear this thing and then you realize, oh, now I know. It's not so easy. Because it requires detachment. And that detachment is not just that you can say, I will be detached. That detachment means to be detached from trying to enjoy the modes of material nature. That will not happen unless one applies oneself to the process of bhakti, vairagya, jnana, whatever is being described here. That is the process of starting that disassociation. And that is why Kapila is explaining, when one becomes mature in this understanding, then he can wake up from that dream. And then the nature of this false ego becomes clear. Okay, so I think I should stop here. We have come to verse 16. I was hoping I'll complete this chapter, but never mind. Don't need to rush through this. We are at verse 16. Probably next week we cover the rest of the chapter. We'll take a pause. So next week we will cover from verse 17. Verse 17, Devahuti starts asking a question to Lord Kapila based on what Lord Kapila has explained so far. And essentially, Devahuti says the same thing what I just explained. She's telling Kapila, my son, oh Lord, the consciousness is so enmeshed within this body-mind complex. With this consciousness, so enmeshed. Is it really even practically possible to extricate it? It's practically impossible. You're telling something theoretically. How to separate it out? How one can actually extricate and develop this? And it's a very good question. Because yes, theoretically everything sounds nice. But the important question is it practically doable, and how do I do it? And that is what the process of sadhana entails. That is what the system entails. Of course, for us who are taken to the path of Ananya Bhakti Yoga, exclusive pure devotional service, we do not have to follow necessarily all the steps here. For us, if we simply exclusively focus on Kevala Bhakti, Ananya Bhakti, Ananyascintayanto Mam Yejana Paripasate, Ananyascintayanto, if one is exclusively devoted to serving and pleasing the Lord, that serving and pleasing, as was discussed in the last chapter, or was it 2 chapters ago, Lord Kapila himself said that fire of bhakti is so powerful, it can burn. There the word burn was not used, there the word dissolve was used. That even the subtle body can be dissolved and the pure soul will shine forth. Very beautiful. There's another very beautiful example given of this of a similar analogy later in this chapter, which we'll discuss the next time. But for us, suffice to say that simply if we seriously follow the process of devotional service, ABCD, association of devotees, reading the Gita and the Bhagavatam in the association of devotees, chanting the holy names, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, and eating Krishna Prasad. If we stick to this in the association and we abstain from sinful activities and we perform our material duties diligently and with detachment, very rapidly one can make spiritual advancement. These are very common basic principles. This is a very, very simple way of making spiritual advancement. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. I'm going to open the floor for any questions or comments. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Sudhir Sundar Prabhu.
Prabhu, I just wanted to make one point. The
Yeah.
nature of the soul is active. So that is why it is very important for us to engage in bhakti.
Yes. Correct, Prabhu. That is correct. So the soul cannot remain idle. That is why it is important to engage the senses somehow. That is why other processes are actually quite unnatural and people actually become frustrated.
Sit down or sit down on the carpet.
Yeah, correct, Prabhu. So bhakti is very natural. In fact, Prabhupada oftentimes says across his various purports, Gita and Bhagavatam, that it is not actually possible to empty the mind or become desireless or stop all activities. That is neither desirable nor is it actually practically possible. What we have to do is realign our desires, our thinking, our activities from aham mama, satisfying one's own false ego and for one's own enjoyment, to become directed towards haritoshanam. Haritoshanam. Sanushtitasya dharmasya sansiddhir haritoshanam. The perfection of the performance of all activities, all duties is to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the perfection. So sometimes if a person is not very advanced, Prabhupada would give this example. If a person is not very advanced and cannot be engaged in positive activities of serving the Lord, then just to stop his naughty material activities, sometimes the scriptures or the guru may recommend, just keep quiet, don't do anything, just sit here quietly. Just like a class teacher, sometimes when the student, instead of studying, is making so much noise, and the teacher realizes that this boy is neither going to study nor can he keep quiet and sit in the class, then what the teacher will do? The teacher will make him stand outside the class, hold his hands, finger on the lips, make him stand out. That is not the perfection of being in school, but sometimes that is necessary because the student has become so notorious, such a disturbance for everybody. So sometimes the scriptures recommend this kind of artificial mauna or artificial desirelessness, but it is artificial. One cannot maintain that state for long. So our ultimate objective is to positively engage our mind and senses in the transcendental service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because that is our eternal dharma, Sanatana Dharma. Yes, so Any other questions or comments?
Prabhuji, Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prashant ji.
I've just put my question in the chat box.
The three types of ahankar. Actually, we discussed this 2 classes ago. Ahankar in the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. So I suggest you can go into the chapters. I think it's 2 chapters ago. Ahankar in the mode of goodness, ahankar. So in the evolution of ahankar, because ahankar is the first element which is produced from the Mahat Tattva. So ahankar comes in the mode of ignorance, passion, and then in the mode of goodness. So there's a progressive creation of the ahankar, and different elements come from different. The mind comes from ahankar of one type. The intelligence comes from ahankar of another type. The material senses come from ahankar of another type. So that evolution is explained, but in a very simple way, without getting into too much technicality. Vaikarika, Tejasa, and Tamasa are the 3 types of ahankar. Vaikarika, Tejasa, and Tamasa. Tamasa is in the mode of ignorance. Vaikarika is in the mode of goodness, and Tejasa is in the mode of passion. So again, without too much technicality, all we have to understand is that when the pure consciousness of the soul gets contacted with the material nature with a desire to enjoy, the pure consciousness becomes muddy. Yeah, muddy, right? Because mud gets added to it. The purity is lost. So these 3 gunas are 3 levels of pollution. One is so muddy that you cannot see anything but the mud. Like a chocolate drink, right? You have a chocolate drink. You make Milo. Can you see through Milo? Can you say this is water? Nothing you can see through. It is like chocolate color. So mode of ignorance is like that, dark. You cannot, you're practically lost the original nature. So ahankar in the mode of ignorance has gone very far. In the mode of Taijasa or in the mode of passion, it's a little bit more visible. Maybe like another beverage, maybe some apple juice, not fully dark like the chocolate, but at least there is some light, at least which will flow out of it. Some shine you will see. You cannot see through the apple juice, but at least there is some. If there is some light on the other side, at least the light will come. If you throw a glass of Milo, even that will not come through. And then there is a sattva gun where the consciousness is more pure, still not fully clear water, but maybe like a chrysanthemum tea or a lemon juice. It is still slightly murky, but at least you can see through it. You can see to some extent what is on the other side. So one's consciousness can get influenced to a great degree by tamogun, rajogun, or sattvagun, which are different levels of infection. And these different gunas produce different kinds of ahankara. The controlling deity for this ahankara is actually Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva controls the ahankara tattva. That's why he's Shambhu. Shambhu itself is the ahankara tattva. In fact, the Shambhu itself is made of these 3 elements of Taijasa, Tamasa, and Vaikarika. Maybe that's a very big topic. I don't want to go into that. But this transformed, the pure consciousness, when it becomes transformed by contact of material nature, is what creates the Shambhu Tattva, which has these 3 types of ahankar. Ahankar in Rajogun, Sattvagun, Tamogun. Yeah? So just suffice for you to, if you can remember this much, that this misidentification is of 3 levels. Very deep misidentification, deep ignorance, which is tamogun, misidentification. Then there is mixed, passionate, and then there is sattvagun, where there is some goodness, but there is still misidentification of the body as an object of enjoyment. Yeah, I hope that helps a bit.
Yes, very much. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Anything else? Any other questions? Okay, so then thank you all very much. So before we end, Monday is Ekadashi, 21st. It's also a special Ekadashi, also known as the Pandava Nirjala Ekadashi. The Mahatmya of this Ekadashi, the greatness of this Ekadashi is that if somebody is able to observe this Ekadashi as Nirjal, Nirjal means not just not taking grains, but not eating anything and not even drinking water. From sunrise that day to the sunrise or the breakfast time next day, not even drinking water for around 24 hours or more. If one is able to observe that, then one gets the benefit of doing all the Ekadashis of the year. Of course, this doesn't mean that you only observe this and don't observe others. But even if you have accidentally broken any other Ekadashi fast, you overcome all the defects of all the other observances of Ekadashi simply by observing this one Ekadashi. So Bhimasen, one of the 5 Pandavas, he was such a voracious eater because of the Vrika, Agni in his stomach. So he was never able to fast. All the other Pandavas would, be able to fast, but this was one Ekadashi which Bhima observed. And because of this Ekadashi, he gets the fruit of the fasting for all the other Ekadashis. So those who can, it is good if you can observe Nirjal. If you cannot observe Nirjal, then you don't have to go to the other extreme. You can just observe a normal Ekadashi by not eating grains, beans, pulses. That's another way. Or if you can just stick to fruits, that's also good. Whatever austerities you can do, but obviously Ekadashi one must observe. If one doesn't observe Ekadashi, then one actually eats sin. That is the verdict of the scriptures, because it is said Papa Karma takes the shelter of the grains on the Ekadashi Tithi. So Ekadashi is considered a very important fast, twice a month, on the 11th day of the waxing moon and the 11th day of the waning moon. So Monday is a very auspicious day, so please observe if possible. And then we will meet again on Wednesday. And of course, on Ekadashi, as usual, one should increase one's devotional activities as far as possible. Hearing, chanting, etc. And any other spiritual activities and charities as much as possible. Okay, just wanted to remind you. Okay, thank you all very much. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki.
Yay.
Thank you, Prabhu. And